find your lack of faith disturbing.
Enough of this.
Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope.
Goodbye, old friend. May the Force be with you.
It's been nearly 49 years since Star Wars burst onto cinema screens on May 25, 1977, and showed the world what movies could become. A space opera filmed on a shoestring budget that nobody believed in turned into the phenomenon that built an empire. The cast wasn't supposed to work. Unknown kids, respected British legends, and performers hidden inside robots and fur. Their lives after the cameras stopped were filled with triumph, heartbreak, quiet dignity, and profound loss. Some became megastars. Others disappeared into the background. A few never got the recognition they deserved, but all of them, every single one, helped create something bigger than themselves. Let's remember the faces behind the galaxy far, far away. Alec Guinness as Obi-Wan Kenobi. Sir Alec Guinness was 62 years old when he stepped into the robes of Ben Kenobi in 1977, already a celebrated actor who'd won an Academy Award for The Bridge on the River Kwai. To him, Star Wars was a curious little film with dialogue he called lamentable. Yet his performance as the wise Jedi Master became the soul of the entire saga, earning him the only Oscar nomination in the original film. But here's the complicated truth. Guinness never loved Star Wars. He thought the script was nonsense, the fans overwhelming. In his autobiography, he wrote about asking a young autograph seeker to promise never to watch it again. The boy cried. Guinness felt terrible, but couldn't shake the feeling that this space opera had overshadowed everything else he'd done. He negotiated 2.25% of the film's profits, a deal that seemed absurd until Star Wars exploded. It made him wealthy beyond measure, and he resented every penny. He was knighted in 1959, married to Marula Salomon for 62 years, and had one son, Matthew. In February 2000, Guinness was diagnosed with prostate cancer. 2 days before his death, doctors discovered it had spread to his liver. He passed away on August 5, 2000 at age 86. His wife Marula, also battling cancer, died just 2 months later, as if she'd been waiting for permission to let go. The man who gave the Force its first voice rests now in Petersfield Cemetery. He wanted to be remembered for Lawrence of Arabia and Bridge on the River Kwai, but to a galaxy of fans, he will always be the old hermit who believed a farm boy could save the universe. Sometimes what we give the world matters more than what we wanted to give. Mark Hamill as Luke Skywalker. Mark Hamill was 25 at the premiere, a kid from Oakland whose father was a Navy captain. He'd done soap operas and one failed TV series when George Lucas saw something in him, a farm boy quality, an innocence that could grow into heroism. The audition tape shows a baby-faced kid radiating hope. Lucas knew immediately. Between A New Hope and The Empire Strikes Back, Hamill was in a severe car accident that fractured his nose and left cheekbone. The injuries were serious enough that some fans still debate whether Lucas changed the opening of Empire, the Wampa attack that leaves Luke's face scarred, to explain any visible changes. Hamill has always downplayed this, but the timing was impossible to ignore. He returned and won back-to-back Saturn Awards for Best Actor. But after Return of the Jedi in 1983, movie roles dried up. Hollywood didn't know what to do with Luke Skywalker. He was too famous to disappear, too typecast to transform. So he reinvented himself entirely. He became one of the greatest voice actors in history, most famously as the Joker in Batman, the animated series starting in 1992, a role he's played for over 3 decades. He worked in shadows, respected but never quite a movie star again. It didn't seem to bother him. He'd found a different kind of creative freedom. Then in 2015, The Force Awakens brought Luke back. In The Last Jedi, Hamill finally played an older, broken Luke, and his performance stunned audiences who'd never seen him act like that. Raw, damaged, real. He married Mary Lou York in 1978. They've been together 48 years with 3 children. She was a dental hygienist when they met. He was the biggest movie star on the planet. She didn't care. Today, in 2026, Mark Hamill is 74 years old and still working. The boy who stared at twin sons became the man who understood that the Force was always with him, even in the quiet years between trilogies. Maybe especially then. Harrison Ford as Han Solo. Harrison Ford was 34 when Star Wars premiered. and he'd almost given up acting. He was working as a carpenter when Lucas asked him to read lines for screen tests. Ford wasn't supposed to be cast. He was just helping other actors audition. But his cocky delivery, that smirk, the way he played Han Solo like he was too cool to care, Lucas couldn't unsee it. Ford improvised constantly. When Leia says, "I love you," and the script called for Han to say, "I love you too," Ford said, "I know," instead. It became the most famous line in the trilogy. After Star Wars, Ford became one of the biggest movie stars on the planet. Raiders of the Lost Ark made him Indiana Jones. Blade Runner made him a noir icon. Witness earned him an Oscar nomination. Working Girl, The Fugitive, Air Force One. He balanced blockbusters and dramas, never letting one role define him. He's been married 3 times and has 5 children. In 2015, he crash-landed a vintage plane on a golf course, suffering a broken pelvis and ankle. He was 72. Most men would quit. Ford healed and got back in the cockpit, because that's who he is. That same year, he returned as Han Solo in The Force Awakens. When he said, "Chewie, we're home," audiences around the world wept. It wasn't just Han coming home, it was all of us. In 2023, at 81, he put on Indiana Jones's fedora one last time. Critics said he was too old. Ford didn't care what critics said. Today in 2026, Harrison Ford is 83 years old and still working. Han Solo flew the Kessel Run in less than 12 parsecs. Harrison Ford has been outrunning time for 50 years. Carrie Fisher as Princess Leia. Carrie Frances Fisher was 19 when she first put on Princess Leia's white robes. Daughter of Debbie Reynolds and Eddie Fisher, she'd grown up in the wreckage of Hollywood's most infamous divorce. Her father left her mother for Elizabeth Taylor when Carrie was 2. She learned early that fame was beautiful and brutal. Leia was supposed to be a damsel. Instead, Fisher made her fierce, sarcastic, commanding. She grabbed a blaster and led her own escape. Lucas let her because she made it work. Behind the fame, Fisher battled bipolar disorder and addiction, self-medicating during Star Wars. Years later, she joked that she didn't remember making the first film. She was too high. Late in life, she revealed a secret. During filming, she had a 3-month affair with Harrison Ford. She was 19. He was 33, married with kids. "It was Han and Leia during the week and Carrie and Harrison during the weekend," she said. Ford has never confirmed or denied it. Fisher wrote about it anyway. She became Hollywood's most sought-after script doctor, rewriting scripts in secret for massive fees. Hook, Lethal Weapon 3, The Wedding Singer, Sister Act. Writers would send her broken third acts and she'd fix them overnight. Raised daughter Billie Lourd, wrote best-selling books turning her pain into dark comedy. Returned as General Leia in 2015. On December 23, 2016, Fisher suffered a massive heart attack on a flight from London to Los Angeles. A passenger performed CPR for 10 minutes before paramedics took over. She died December 27th at age 60, never regaining consciousness. The next day, her mother Debbie Reynolds suffered a stroke while planning Carrie's funeral at her son Todd's house. Her last words, "I want to be with Carrie." She died hours later. Mother and daughter, separated by 1 day. Part of Carrie's ashes rest beside her mother at Forest Lawn Memorial Park. The rest remain in a giant novelty Prozac pill, a final joke from a woman who turned pain into laughter. Her daughter Billie carried it to the funeral. The princess who never needed rescuing taught us that survival isn't pretty. It's messy, it's hard, and it's worth fighting for anyway. Peter Cushing as Grand Moff Tarkin. Peter Cushing was 63 when he walked onto the Star Wars set in 1976. Already a legend of British horror cinema as Hammer films Frankenstein and Van Helsing. Grand Moff Tarkin was the Empire's cold governor who ordered Alderaan's destruction without hesitation. Millions of lives gone with one word. Cushing played it with terrifying calm. Here's what fans don't know. The costume boots were too small for Cushing's size 12 feet, causing excruciating pain. He asked Lucas to shoot him from the waist up, and he wore slippers in those scenes. That is why Moff Tarkin was so hostile all the time, he joked years later. His feet were killing him. Carrie Fisher remembered him fondly, said Cushing smelled like linen and lavender, and deliberately stood in shadows during her interrogation scene so light would shine on her face. On her first day, teaching her without saying a word. But Star Wars came at the end of a lonely life. Cushing's wife, Helen, died in 1971 from emphysema. In his autobiography, he admitted running up and down stairs that night, hoping to induce a heart attack and join her. It didn't work. He lived because she'd left him a poem, begging him to live fully, to honor her by continuing. In 1982, Cushing was diagnosed with prostate cancer. He refused surgery and lived another 12 years on sheer stubbornness. He passed away August 11, 1994, at age 81 in Canterbury, England. In 2016, Tarkin was digitally resurrected for Rogue One, Cushing's face recreated through CGI, his voice reconstructed from old recordings. Some called it a miracle of technology, others called it grave robbery. Either way, the man who wore slippers because his feet hurt became immortal in pixels, forever commanding the empire he destroyed so long ago. David Prowse as Darth Vader. David Prowse was 41 when Lucas offered him a choice: play Chewbacca or play the villain. At 6'7" and built like a statue, the British weightlifting champion answered immediately, "Thank you very much. I'll have the villain's piece. You always remember the bad guys." He was right about that. Prowse performed every movement inside the black armor. The imposing walk, the mechanical gestures, the way Vader loomed over everyone. His thick West Country accent was dubbed over by James Earl Jones, but the physicality was all Prowse. He made Vader move like death itself. He was told that when Vader's mask was removed in Return of the Jedi, his face would finally be seen. The reveal, the moment, the validation. It never happened. Lucas cast Sebastian Shaw instead. Prowse found out at the premiere, watching himself erased. Their relationship soured. Prowse gave interviews criticizing Lucas. Lucas banned Prowse from official Star Wars events in 2010. They never reconciled. Prowse died without ever getting the apology he felt he deserved. But here's what matters. Prowse gave us Vader's imposing stature, the deliberate stride, the mechanical precision, the physicality that made Vader terrifying before he ever spoke. Married to Norma for 57 years with 3 children, Prowse announced his dementia diagnosis in 2014. In November 2020, he was hospitalized with COVID-19. Pandemic restrictions meant family couldn't visit. He died alone on November 28, 2020, at age 85. Mark Hamill tweeted, "He was a kind man, and much more than Darth Vader. He loved his fans as much as they loved him. The man inside cinema's most famous mask never got to show his face. But before he terrorized the galaxy, he saved children's lives in Britain as the Green Cross Code Man, teaching them to cross streets safely. That's the legacy few remember. That's the one that matters most." James Earl Jones as Darth Vader. James Earl Jones was 46 when Lucas called asking if he'd dub dialogue for a character in a space movie. Jones recorded all of Vader's lines in about 2.5 hours. He was paid $7,000. He asked not to be credited out of deference to David Prowse. He thought of himself as just special effects. That voice, deep, resonant, menacing. It became the sound of villainy itself. But here's the irony that still takes your breath away. Jones spent childhood unable to speak. Born in Mississippi in 1931, a severe stutter rendered him functionally mute for years. He communicated through notes. Teachers thought he was slow. He learned to speak again in high school when an English teacher noticed he'd written a poem and made him read it aloud. "If you wrote it, you can say it," she told him. The boy who couldn't talk became the voice of Darth Vader, became Mufasa in The Lion King, became CNN itself. This is CNN. Jones achieved EGOT status: Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, Tony. He won Tonys for The Great White Hope and Fences, earned an Oscar nomination for The Great White Hope, and appeared in nearly 200 films. In 2022, the Court Theater on Broadway was renamed the James Earl Jones Theater. He cried at the ceremony. He married Cecilia Hart in 1982 after meeting her on a TV set. They had one son, Flynn. Hart died of ovarian cancer in 2016. Jones, who'd faced death on screen 1,000 times, had to learn to face it in his own home. On September 9, 2024, James Earl Jones passed away at his home in Pawling, New York, at age 93, surrounded by family. His son was holding his hand. The stuttering boy from Mississippi became one of the most commanding voices in history. He voiced evil and wisdom, kings and fathers. And when people heard that deep rumble, they heard authority. They heard power, and they heard proof that the human voice can shake the universe. Anthony Daniels as C-3PO. Anthony Daniels was 30 when cast as C-3PO, a fussy protocol droid perpetually worried about everything. Daniels is the only actor to appear in every single theatrical Star Wars film, From A New Hope in 1977 to The Rise of Skywalker in 2019. 42 years inside a golden suit. Think about that. The costume was a nightmare. Rigid, hot, nearly impossible to sit in. The first version cut his skin. Between takes, crew had to remove the top half just so he could breathe. Daniels has said he nearly quit during filming of A New Hope. The suit was that unbearable. He stayed, film after film, delivering impeccable comic timing and surprising depth to a character who never shows his face. He's spoken about his complicated relationship with C-3PO. Times he resented being defined by the role. Times he wished he could just be Anthony Daniels the actor instead of the guy who played the robot. But he made peace with it. C-3PO brought joy to millions. That matters more than his ego. Today in 2026, Anthony Daniels is 79 years old, still making appearances at Star Wars events, still fielding questions about a character he first played when Disco was king. C-3PO said, "We're doomed." Daniels proved him wrong. Showing up, even when nobody sees your face, even when your body screams at you to quit, that's its own heroism. Kenny Baker as R2-D2. Kenny Baker was 42 when Lucas cast him to operate R2-D2. Standing 3 feet 8 inches, Baker had spent his career in ice skating, circus work, and comedy. He initially turned down the role. He didn't want to break up his duo, the Minitones. Lucas persisted. Baker relented. Playing R2-D2 was brutal. The costume weighed 80 pounds. Baker controlled movements from inside, unable to see much, sweating through every take. But he made R2-D2 alive. The tilted dome, the wobbles, the timing. R2 had no dialogue, just beeps and whistles. But everyone understood him. That was Baker. Pure expression through movement. Baker became close friends with Peter Mayhew, who played Chewbacca. The 7'3" Wookiee and 3'8" droid operator bonded over shared struggles, finding clothes, fitting in cars, dealing with strangers' stares. "We understood each other on a level few others can," Mayhew wrote. They'd sit together at conventions, these two men who'd spent their lives being different. Baker was married to Eileen from 1970 until her death in 1993. On August 13, 2016, Kenny Baker passed away at age 81 after a long illness. Mark Hamill tweeted, "He was the droid I was looking for." The little droid who beeped through the galaxy was brought to life by a man from circus tents and ice shows. Baker gave R2-D2 personality through movement alone. No face, no voice, just heart. Peter Mayhew as Chewbacca. Peter Mayhew was 32 and working as a hospital attendant when a photographer saw his photo standing head and shoulders above a crowd and thought, "That's special." At 7 feet 3 inches tall due to a pituitary gland condition, Mayhew got cast in Sinbad and the Eye of the Tiger. Lucas saw that film and knew, this is Chewbacca. The costume weighed over 20 pounds and was unbearably hot. Mayhew battled chronic knee pain that got worse every year. By The Force Awakens, he needed surgery and a cane to walk. Between takes, he'd use the cane. Then he'd hand it off, stand up straight, and become Chewbacca again. He moved from England to Texas, married Angie in 1999, founded the Peter Mayhew Foundation for Families in Crisis, and attended countless conventions with infinite patience and warmth. Fans loved him. He loved them back. On April 30th, 2019, Peter Mayhew passed away at his home in Texas at age 74. Harrison Ford said, "Peter was a kind and gentle man, possessed of great dignity and noble character. The man who played the galaxy's most famous Wookiee is buried in Texas under open sky. But every time Chewbacca roared, it was Peter Mayhew saying, 'I'm here. I've got your back. I always will.'" It's been nearly 49 years since Luke stared at twin sons. Han shot first, Leia refused to be rescued, and Obi-Wan told us the Force would be with us, always. Of the principal cast, only 3 remain. Mark Hamill, now 74. Harrison Ford, now 83. Anthony Daniels, now 79. The rest have become one with the Force. Alec Guinness in 2000. Peter Cushing in 1994. Kenny Baker in 2016. Carrie Fisher in 2016. Her mother the very next day. Peter Mayhew in 2019. David Prowse in 2020. James Earl Jones in 2024. But here's the thing about Star Wars. It doesn't end. Every time someone presses play, every time a child sees it for the first time, every time we hear, May the Force be with you. They all come back, young again, alive again. The cast didn't just make a movie. They created a mythology that transcended film. They gave us a place to believe in, characters who feel like family, a story that reminds us darkness can be defeated. And in a world that often feels darker than the Death Star's shadow, that galaxy far, far away still shines like twin suns on the horizon, reminding us that hope is stronger than fear, that love is stronger than hate, that the Force is with us, always, always.